In 1 week, the Louisville women's basketball team will kick off the 2023-24 campaign as they travel to Cincinnati in the season opener. On today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast, we're going to preview the upcoming season, discussing newcomer expectations, season outlook, potential starting five, and more. With that being said, stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege. Use the code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy. As always, I want to personally thank you all for making this your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. The basketball season is almost here. The women's basketball team will open up the campaign when they travel up I-71 to play Cincinnati on Monday evening, 6 o'clock tip-off for Jeff Walz's squad. And for Jeff Walz, it feels like a very uncharacteristic offseason from what we've seen. Now, Walz has been definitely not falling by the wayside when it comes to portal recruiting since the transfer portal and, more importantly, the one-time transfer allowance came about. Walz has definitely reaped the benefits of that over the past couple of portal off seasons. Emily Inksler, Chelsea Hall, Chrislyn Carr, Morgan Jones are a couple players that have come to Louisville via other programs and utilizing the transfer portal. Now, most of these players have been grad transfers. So in terms of the one-time transfer rule, I think that, coaches in general, and this just isn't Walz, but everyone in general, that you have to really start to follow that pattern. And if you don't, you sort of get passed up because traditional recruiting really isn't a thing of the present anymore. It's more so of the past. Now, granted, there are going to be, top programs that recruit the top 60, 70 players in the country as they normally do, but there's going to be a ton of more movement throughout college basketball. We have seen that just because a player plays at a certain school doesn't mean that they are going to end their career at a certain school. And we've seen it to the extent of a star level player, All-American type player that goes from one school to another school. So everything is possible nowadays. And you look at what Louisville had to simply address in the offseason was replacing I have to count how many players this is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 scholarship players from last year's team are no longer with the Cardinals program. Most of these players graduated. Liz Dixon, Mikasa Robinson, Chrislyn Carr, Josie Williams, Morgan Jones, Norika Kono. But a couple others transferred. Most notably, Haley Van Lith going to LSU, Peyton Verhulst left in the middle of the season, and then freshmen Jalen Brown and Ziona Walker both transferred too. So, needless to say, Jeff Walz and company had their work cut out for them this offseason. The top 3 scorers had to be replaced. 6 of the top 7 scorers also had to be replaced overall. So, like I said, we aren't really used to seeing Jeff Walz have to bring in that many newcomers per season. He's pretty, significant in developing players, year in, year out, and having those players step up, with each coming season. But he is just simply following the pattern that has been laid ahead by the transfer portal. And he's not the only one being affected by this, but by what they did in the portal, you can tell that Walz is buying in to the new style of recruiting, and he's taken advantage of the scholarship availability at Louisville. Before we talk about the newcomers, 4 players are back. Olivia Cochran, Marissa Russell, Nyla Harris, and Alexia Mobley. 4 players that I expect to all play respectively significant roles this season for the Cardinals. Olivia Cochran is the main one coming back. Essentially, the heart and soul of this team, averaged essentially 9 and 6.5 last year, 8.4 points per game, 6.5 rebounds per game. Has played for the Cardinals program a ton of minutes over the past 3 seasons, and now in her senior season, she's going to be relied upon to go from being a secondary or even tertiary scoring option for the Cardinals and being at worst a secondary option and a player that they go to in the middle to be able to score consistently. Because last year the issue was, if not Haley Van Lith, who is scoring consistently for the Cardinals? I think one of the options to replace some of that production is Olivia Cochran. So if she gets to a point to where her statistical numbers are increasing by just a couple of points, where she's averaging 11, 12 points per game, that's pretty solid for Louisville, especially with how balanced this team is going to be this season. For the first time in quite some time, there have been seasons to where there hasn't been a true star, but there's sort of been a go-to scoring option, and that may be the case this season with a couple of the players that Louisville has. But I think it's going to be probably the most balanced team that Jeff Walz has had in almost close to a decade. So that's something to look at. Marissa Russell also back, 5 points per game, 2.5 rebounds per game. The senior can play point guard, in my opinion. We saw her handle the ball at the Global Jam competition this past summer, to where they won gold up in the event at Canada. So that's something that definitely is encouraging, to watch Marissa Russell play high-level minutes against solid competition while handling the basketball. I think of whether she's playing on ball, off ball, she's still going to get a ton of minutes in this rotation. I look at this team, and there's a handful of players that can play the point, but outside of maybe Jada Curry and maybe Nina Ricards, I think that it is going to be a handful of players that can handle the ball, and then they just essentially switch off ball handling duty. Nyla Harris saw a good amount of action during her freshman season, and that's something that I won't necessarily go as far as saying that it's uncharacteristic for true freshmen to play a ton for Jeff Walz, but I think that the pattern has been that the rotations have been so deep that true freshmen, it takes a while for them to really find their footing. Nyla Harris, despite only averaging 4.2 points per game, 3.6 rebounds per game, she appeared in 38 games and started a good amount of those, averaging 13.6 minutes per contest. I look for her to take the next step forward. The 6'2" native of Orlando, Florida, had some big time moments this past season for the Cardinals that I remember watching and saying that, hey, look, Louisville definitely has a solid player in Nyla Harris moving forward. And I think ultimately it's going to be a situation to where I'm not sure that she starts for this team this year, but she's definitely going to be a key part of this rotation. So I think that that's something to look at moving forward. Alexia Mobley is sort of a wild card on this team. The potential is definitely there. Unfortunately, she has dealt with some injuries to where she hasn't really had a ton of availability. Being a 6'2" sophomore, can play the guard position or the forward position. Extremely athletic, solid defender. Played very, very minimal minutes this past season. Only appeared in 7 games, 1.7 minutes per contest. Had some moments of encouragement in the Global Jam this past summer. I look for her, like Nyla Harris, maybe not to start for the Cardinals right away, but I do think that they are both going to play pretty significant roles for this team moving forward, respectively. So the 4 returners for the Cardinals are all going to play key minutes. This is a roster that didn't fill all the scholarships. So there is an opportunity to where, you see these 11 players potentially playing some solid minutes. So let's talk about the newcomers. There are a ton of big-time players that committed to Louisville this past spring and will be playing for Louisville coming up here shortly. We'll talk about the expectations for those players here momentarily after we talk about our friends over at Athletic Brewing Company. The game changer this season for me for the Louisville women's basketball team is going to be the chemistry on the court for the Cardinals. That goes without saying, but it is a completely new group, so I think that it is extremely necessary. But Athletic Brewing Company has been the complete game changer for the non-alcoholic beer game. For starters, they brew over 50 styles of craft, non-alcoholic brews, including IPAs, golden sours, and more. My favorite this time of year is definitely the Oktoberfest. It tastes great. They're fit for all time, so you can drink them anytime, anywhere, and make any activity more enjoyable. There's no hangovers associated with Athletic Brewing, so that's one of the key benefits of this. You can find Athletic Brewing Company's non-alcoholic brews at a store near you or buy online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers can use the code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your first online order. That's code LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. Also want to take this time to tell you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kills, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only eligible for U.S. customers. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. I want to take this time to continue to remind you that Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on every Locked On College YouTube channel. College Football Kickoff Live will cover playoff implications, the conference rivalry games, while also going in-depth like only Locked On can, including insight and analysis from our stable of Locked On College hosts covering their team every day. Find Locked On College Football Kickoff Live every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on any Locked On College YouTube channel. You won't want to miss it, so be sure to stay tuned. Okay, discussing this Louisville women's basketball season, a lot of moving parts for this team, a handful of newcomers. And this is where it gets really interesting because of all of the college newcomers, or all of the newcomers that transferred in, all of them the season prior averaged in double digits in terms of scoring. So you're replacing Haley Van Lith. You're having to replace 6 of your top 7 scorers, but you're doing so with players that have been successful at their past stops and have been extremely successful. The true freshman that they do have coming in is Alif Istanbuloglu. I probably pronounced that wrong. I need to get the pronunciation on that. I'm waiting to hear it on the broadcast or hear it from the SID at Louisville. But Alif is from Turkey, 6'3" post player, averaged 11 points per game, 10 rebounds per game this past summer for the Turkish national team. Played for Fenerbahce, which is a professional team over in Turkey, and has been a player that a lot of international scouts have absolutely raved about. They talk about her 3-level scoring. She not only can score inside, has a solid motor, can run the floor really well in transition, but also can step out and shoot the 3. When you look at her shooting form, it's fluid. It doesn't have any hitches in it. It's not necessarily looking to lack any mechanical things to look at. So honestly, it's a good looking shot, when she shoots from behind the arc. So I think that this is sort of a wild card here because she's not redshirting, and Louisville needs some size in the middle to go along with Olivia Cochran, Henny Van Schaik, Nyla Harris, etc. So I could definitely see Alif playing some sort of role for Louisville this upcoming season. Speaking of size, Jeff Walz went out and got Henny Van Schaik, 6'3", forward from Cal State Bakersfield last season, 11.6 points per game, 7.2 rebounds per game, can stretch the floor. Going to be a matchup nightmare for teams because of her ability to shoot the three. One thing to focus on here is going to be the just the overall consistency in the ACC. Is she going to be able to take that step from the mid-major and apply that skill set to the Power Five? And that's going to be a key thing to focus on. So ultimately, I feel as if this is a situation where Louisville got a solid rotational player that's going to be able to get on the court and essentially defend the rim and be able to shoot the three pretty well. So Aliff and Henny are both two players that I think are going to play key roles for this team this upcoming season. Continuing on in the front court is, honestly, you can consider some of these players guards, some of these players forwards. So we'll just go right down the line. Jada Curry is probably the main one that a lot of people are focusing on. The guard from California averaged 15 and a half this past year, 3.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 34% from behind the arc, can really create her own shot. Might not necessarily be Haley Van Lith, but she has a deep bag when it comes to her scoring arsenal. Does a good job of being a three-level scorer, solid vision as well. I probably look for her to be the starting point guard this upcoming season for the Cardinals, and I think that she's going to play a key role for this team. Could end up being, in my opinion, probably will be one of the top three leading scorers for this team. Sydney Taylor, who has been getting a ton of publicity for this team, 5'9" guard from UMass, grad transfer, averaged 16.1 points per game, was a first-team All-Atlantic 10 selection, Global Jam MVP for the Cardinals this past year, played in multiple 3-on-3 tournaments for the USA team, and was top 10 in the country, number 7 to be exact, in made threes, having over 100 made threes. One of the issues last year was perimeter shooting. I think that this is a great match this is a great match for Jeff Walz' system. Three-point shooter that also plays defense and can not only score at the three line, but can also take it inside and get to the rim. Kiki Jefferson was a player that when she committed to Louisville from James Madison, I was extremely excited because she has all ACC level potential, as do Curry and Taylor. But Kiki, 6'1" guard from JMU, averaged 18, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, was the Sun Belt Player of the Year, and is on the preseason watch list for the Cheryl Miller Award, which is awarded to the best small forward in the country. She's going to be a player that I think that Louisville needed a athletic wing that can rebound well and that can create her own offense, and I think that she checks off all those boxes. Look, she is a potential all-ACC first-team level selection, so she's going to be the player that I have a ton of expectations for this season because of what she was able to do. She has a laundry list of achievements and accolades. If you want to look at those, go to Louisville's official website and go to her player profile. Next up is Nina Ricards from Florida, a 5'9" guard. Was second on the team in scoring, 12.1 points per game, 4.9 rebounds. Also solid defender, 1.4 steals per game. Can play either on ball or off ball, stretching the floor, being able to hit the deep ball, but does a great job in the pick and roll, does a great job of getting to the rim. Extremely quick guard that I think could be a potential starter for this team, but at the very least, she's going to be a very key rotational piece for Jeff Walz' squad. And then the last, but obviously not least, transfer was one that came in towards the middle of the season from Georgia Tech. That's Ilea Love, goes by Lily, 6'1" guard/forward. She only appeared in a couple games last season before transferring. The year prior, she made 31 starts as a sophomore, averaging 10.5 points per game, 4.8 rebounds per game. Solid defender, pretty good athlete that can rebound the ball, be a good asset in transition play. And I feel like, she's going to be a key for this team regardless if she starts or not. That's something as well, as even if some of these players don't start, you're still going to see them play a key role in these rotations for Jeff Walz. So what are those rotations going to look like? Well, that is the main question. We're going to talk outlook and rotation prediction here momentarily after we talk about our friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks, the title sponsor of the show, is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including professionals and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. A couple of the main benefits include quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what makes PrizePicks number one. It's the most fun I've had for the past month or so, winning up to 10 times my money thus far in just a couple weeks of the football season. Like I said, you select 2 or more players, pick more than or less than on their projected stats, and place your entry. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Once again, prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege while using the code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. So be sure to take advantage of this amazing opportunity. Heading into the final segment of this women's basketball preview episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast, we talked about the returning players, the newcomer expectations. Let's talk outlook and starting five predictions. Let's be honest, this is an incredibly tough schedule that Louisville has to play. The ACC is a gauntlet. I mean, it just is. The Cardinals open up as number 17th in the country in the AP poll. They do have a key they have 2 key non-conference matchups at Ole Miss and at UConn. So 2 games to focus on there. Then you have DePaul, which usually is always at least pretty respectable. Gonzaga as well. So Kentucky, not to mention. So the non-conference slate, Washington in late December, needless to say, it's pretty tough. But then you go to conference play and you have multiple ranked teams. You have 4 ranked teams outside of Louisville. Virginia Tech's number 8, Notre Dame's number 10, UNC's 16, and Florida State's 18. To make matters more interesting, you have 3 teams in the receiving votes category, NC State, Duke, and Miami. So seemingly over half the conference is either ranked or very, very close to being ranked. So it's going to be an uphill battle for Jeff Walz's team. But I do think that the expectation is to get back to another Elite 8 appearance. And I think that it is totally achievable with this team. Obviously, it goes without saying that the chemistry has to be there on the court and off the court as well. And they're going to have to essentially win the games that they're supposed to win. And, at least I think they can get to top 3 in the conference. So we will see how that unfolds this season. But potential starting lineups, it could go a couple different ways. I think that right now there are 4 locks for starting lineups. I think Jada Curry, Sydney Taylor, Kiki Jefferson, and Olivia Cochran are all going to start for the Cardinals. Curry and Taylor, I think, are going to be the leading or the starting backcourt. Kiki Jefferson can play guard, but being 6'1" with that athleticism and ability to rebound, I think that she's going to be sort of a hybrid guard forward that's going to play in this offense. And Olivia Cochran, obviously, the heart and soul of this team. Outside of that, I think it's going to be one of Nina Ricards / Marissa Russell. I could see both of them in the starting lineup, but I could also see both of them as spark plugs off the bench and giving a ton of energy off the bench. Seeing either one of them being the starting point guard for the second unit. So regardless, I think that the 4 of Curry, Taylor, Jefferson, and Cochran are going to start, and then one of Ricards and Russell is going to start. Outside of that, obviously, the one who doesn't start of Ricards and Russell is going to be in that second unit. I think that's where you have Alexia Mobley, Lily Love, Nyla Harris, and Henny Van Schaik. The X factor for me is how ready is Alif Istanbuloglu ready to play? Because if she's more advanced than, projected, although she is an extremely talented player, if the transition to American basketball, if her transition to the college game is more seamless than predicted, whose minutes does she take? And what does that look like for this rotation? That is the main question for me, especially a player of her size being 6'3". One of the issues with the Cardinals over the past couple of years has been that lack of size in the middle. You have to replace Liz Dixon, 6'5". You had to replace Josie Williams as well. So I know that you have Cochran and Harris, who are both 6'2". You have Van Schaik, but Henne is more of a player that's going to play on the perimeter, I feel like, more than being an interior presence. So if Aliff is going to be a player that is ready to play right away, or at least heading into conference play, I definitely think that could shake up the rotation a little bit, but that's just something moving forward. But like I mentioned, Louisville opening up the season a week from today, 6 o'clock Eastern tip-off against the Cincinnati Bearcats on the road. Jeff Walz and company looking to take this Cardinals team back to the Elite Eight. And we will obviously have all the coverage for the women's basketball team on the Locked On Louisville podcast, which covers your team 5 days a week, the Louisville Cardinals,